Breaking tonight, it's been less than 3 days since Donald Trump became President-elect Trump. And for a third straight night since, massive protests unfolding across the U.S. Some demonstrators suggesting today that they've been saving their energy for this. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith, in for Megyn Kelly tonight. We have a live look for you at Miami, Fort Worth, Atlanta, and New York tonight, where the usual Friday night festivities are being put on hold as hundreds of people take to the streets protesting President-elect Donald Trump. And while things may be tense right now, it was a different story in the city of Portland, Oregon last night, where an initially peaceful protest involving some 4,000 people wound up descending into what police designated a full-on riot. Sheriff David Clark and Julie Roginski join us in moments on the unrest that we're seeing tonight. But first, we go to reporter Kelsey Watts of Fox affiliate KPTV in Portland for a live report. Kelsey, what are you seeing there?
Sandra, a much different feeling here this evening as we begin our fourth straight night of protests here in the city of Portland, where hundreds of people are gathered at this hour here in front of Portland City Hall. You can see this crowd here behind me gathering once again before heading out tonight. But as you mentioned, I think what happened here in the city last night is really in a category by itself. That's when that protest became a riot. 4,000 people in the streets taking over bridges, even interrupting freeway traffic. But city leaders say it's very important to note it was only a small group of people that were in the midst with those thousands of others who were causing the damage in the city. Broken windows at car dealerships and small businesses, fires being lit, rocks being thrown at police. One of my colleagues even saw glass bottles being thrown off of parking structures. By the end of the night, police finally did regain control. 25 arrests were made. And I think today here in Portland, it's really been about regrouping, both for Portland police and city leaders who say they do support peaceful protests, but what happened here last night is unacceptable. In fact, the chief of police came out today to ask peaceful protesters to stay home tonight, to take the night off in order to give police a chance to potentially stop that smaller group that might be bent on causing more damage here tonight. Although I also think there's a growing sense of frustration for those at home who don't believe there should be any protests. In fact, one man who supports Donald Trump told us, "I cast my vote, so did you. These protests need to stop." Sandra.
All right, Kelsey, thank you. Live for us from Portland, Oregon tonight. Joining me now, Sheriff David Clark of the Milwaukee County Sheriff's Office and Julie Roginski, a Fox News contributor and Democratic analyst. Sheriff Clark, this is something you are very familiar with. What do you make of what is happening in U.S. cities tonight as these protests continue just 3 nights after Donald Trump was elected president?
Well, these are anarchists, full-fledged anarchists. They don't even support the Constitution. This isn't constitutionally protected behavior. They also advocate for the overthrow of the rule of law here in the United States of America. This is designed to intimidate the Trump administration right out of the gate and to intimidate Trump supporters so that they don't go big and bold once they take office in January. But they cannot be dissuaded by this. Donald Trump ran on a theme, one of the themes of law and order. I'm tired of these police executives, not the cops. The cops are under orders, but I'm tired of them tiptoeing around this. You look at the destruction of these businesses. This undermines the public confidence that their government can't get their arms around this thing. They come in the morning, their businesses are destroyed, cars are vandalized and set on fire, people are injured. This has to be quelled immediately. And if they do not, you're going to see more property destruction. You're going to see people injured, police officers injured, and possibly people killed.
So, Julie,
this must be quelled immediately.
There are calls, Julie, for Donald Trump to say something and step in here. I mean, he really did. He took to Twitter today, said he loves the fact that the small groups of protesters last night have passion for our great country. He said, "We will all come together and be proud." That was after 9 hours before that. He said these protests were very unfair. But where's the president? Does he need to step up and condemn this behavior? The White House has reacted, saying this is constitutionally protected speech and protest. Should President Obama say something at this point?
Well, there's two different things going on. It is constitutionally protected protest and speech when it's just speech. When they start rioting and they start destroying businesses, that's not constitutionally protected behavior. That's unacceptable behavior. Look, I'm disappointed about the outcome of this election as well, but there is no excuse to destroy private property or to riot, to protest an election that, frankly, Donald Trump won. He won the Electoral College. He is our president-elect. These people have to come to terms with that. They can protest peacefully all they want, but there's no excuse to be violent or to start rioting or to hurt people who had nothing to do with Donald Trump becoming president and hurting their business. I will say, I think it would be very helpful, and I'm not sure if this is possible, for Donald Trump and the president to release a joint statement calling on people to, if they want to protest peacefully and to stop rioting. There is no reason that this behavior needs to happen. And I think it would be very helpful in a bipartisan manner if they both did that jointly to show that we have a peaceful transition from one administration to the next. And this is a bipartisan issue.
I mean, you look at this crowd right now, and protesters in L.A. said that they were taking a break and saving their energy for the weekend. So we don't know where this is going. What needs to be done at this point, considering the riots and the violent behavior that we saw, for example, in Portland last night? What can be done now to stop these?
Well, first of all, President-elect Donald Trump has to be a little careful here, because this is the job of the President of the United States, and the Constitution calls for only one, and until January 20th, that's Barack Obama. Look, these are his supporters. These are the people who supported him, Mrs. Bill Clinton. These are people who supported Bernie Sanders as well. It is their responsibility to reach out and to remind these individuals of this time-honored peaceful transition of power here in the United States. So at least to draw the line, that would at least draw the line, and then law enforcement must use all reasonable force. In Milwaukee, I've given my officers, I signed off on allowing them to use the rubber bullets, the bean bags that are, put out from a projectile, and they hurt when they hit you, and the flashbangs, and up to and including tear gas to quell these disturbances.
But
what
it's
happens
come to
is
that, and that's
they
the
let
problem.
it get it. What you can't do is you can't let the momentum build, and that's what happens. It's too late after an hour or so, or 2 hours, when the momentum is on their side and the momentum gets going. So early on is when they have to disperse these crowds.
Sheriff Clark, before I let you go, your name is being floated about as potential Homeland Security chief under the Trump presidency. A lot of speculation out there.
Well, we're a long ways from that. Look, I supported Donald Trump because I thought this country needed his leadership. There were no strings attached. I'm flattered and I'm honored. If the president asked me to serve, I would step up and serve, but I don't think we're there yet.
All right. Sheriff Clark and Julie Roginski, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Well, throughout the hour, we will be monitoring these protests, and we'll bring you any breaking developments if they come. But up next, we'll be speaking to Rich Lowry about the one great irony of many in the wake of this week's election. And David Wool and Matt Bennett are here on suggestions the left's reaction to the results is the exact reason why Donald Trump won in the first place. Plus, breaking news tonight with regard to Trump's White House transition team, with the president-elect tonight extending an olive branch to a very surprising name. Chris Steyerwalt and Mark McKinnon are here on that. Breaking tonight for the third straight night, protesters are taking to the streets to voice their opposition to President-elect Donald Trump. Remarkably, it was just a few weeks ago that some in the media were warning that Trump supporters would be the ones out protesting and rioting if he lost. Watch.
One Boston Globe headline going viral: Trump supporters talk rebellion, assassination at his rallies. You saw the soundbite we ran earlier. You've been to these rallies. How dangerous is this?
He is fueling a toxic movement of rebellion and insurgency. So Donald Trump will lose, and he will then destroy the Republican Party. The frightening question is what he will do to the country in the process.
If there is violence and unrest after Election Day, I think we now know why, based on the hatred that was dripping out of that man's mouth.
So that happened. Rich Lowry is editor of National Review and a Fox News contributor. So they all warned things are going to get messy and violent should Donald Trump lose. And then look what happened.
Yeah, we heard for weeks how important it was, one, to accept the results of the election, and two, how there's this horrible risk there would be Republican mobs roaming the streets and engaging in random acts of violence. And now you have thousands of people on the streets, smashing things, vandalizing things, not accepting the results of the election, and you don't hear really any media outrage about it whatsoever.
So what do we know about these protesters? We know that many of them they're young people for a large part. If you actually look at even the video can tell you a lot of that. Some we're hearing aren't even of voting age. But what do we know about them, and what are they in fact protesting?
Well, I think a lot of them are genuinely shocked that Donald Trump was elected president of the United States. But I think this will be a concerted effort that will go on for a very long time. And I think it'll get worse before it gets better. I think there'll be an attempt to disrupt the inaugural, the way left-wing protesters did with Nixon and with George W. Bush in 2000. And this actually helps Trump, provided he doesn't show that they're getting under his skin. So last night's tweet saying very unfair, not so great. But this morning's tweet sort of rising above it, that's the tone he should set and let the people on the outside hit back at these folks.
All right, in your National Review piece, you said, when have we seen Republican mobs breaking windows and burning things down? What are you talking about there?
Never. I mean, have we ever seen, we had all these dire warnings that you just showed that Republicans were going to go out and riot. I can't remember that ever happening. You know, there was a huge Tea Party rally at the inception of the movement on the Mall, and one of the most famous things about that rally is they all went out afterwards and picked up their trash and made sure it was thrown away. These people aren't going to go out and break windows. And by the way, if you're out there smashing things and throwing things at police because you think Donald Trump is a threat to the rule of law, you lack all self-awareness, not to mention common sense.
Where do you stand on Donald Trump now that he's been elected?
Well, I was never a big supporter, obviously.
I think we're all pretty clear on that.
We established that, but he got it done, and now we all have to hope he succeeds. And I think there's a real chance that the first year, in terms of the domestic agenda, could be a tremendous accomplishment, provided that he gets together with Congress, they keep it together, and they come up with a consensus
agenda.
agenda.
You're suggesting that these riots and these protests could actually be a good thing for Donald Trump if he doesn't let it get under their skin. Is there something that he should do? Julie Regency just suggested that he should put out a joint statement with the sitting president, President Obama. What should Donald Trump do?
I think President Obama should be denouncing this, but I think he should strike the kind of note he did this morning, but otherwise just basically ignore it and let the discussion happen among his surrogates, among commentators. But he's the president of the United States, and what he has to do is elevate. And, you know, part of my misgiving about Trump was about his temperament. And what we have to hope happens now is that kind of the weight of this office, the incredible responsibility that's about to be bestowed on him, forces him to elevate his game. And we've seen signs of that over the last week, and hopefully it continues.
All right, Rich Lowry, thanks for joining us on set tonight. Good to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Today, the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro argued that Trump won for precisely these reasons. David Wohl is an attorney and Trump supporter. Matt Bennett is co-founder of the progressive organization Third Way. He previously served as deputy assistant to President Clinton. David Wohl, where do we start? The reaction that we are seeing, I mean, now 3 nights after the election took place, it's unbelievable. What do you make of all of that?
Well, you know, democracy's wonderful unless your candidate loses, then it's awful. You know, if these people had actually spent the last year and a half listening to Mr. Trump, reading his website, attending his rallies like me and my kids have, they would probably be wearing a hat like this and applauding his candidacy's election instead of acting like childish little reprobates. I got to say, I've never seen anything quite like this diaper pin wearing and the crying. You know, I mean, really? Seriously?
Wow.
Come on. Man up, woman up. If you think you want to change the way that America's going, then you gear up, find a new candidate for 4 years from now, support that candidate, build a political coalition. But engaging in this kind of nonsensical behavior accomplishes nothing other than embarrassing yourselves and your school.
Matt, I mean, you're far from being a Trump supporter. You've made that very clear. But you're writing the left's ridiculous response to Trump election is why he was elected. What are you saying?
Well, look, people are very, very upset. We've never seen anything like this, Senator, in this country. We've never had anyone elected president this manifestly unqualified for office, this willing to engage in the kind of speech and behavior that he engaged in for 18 months on the trail. I was watching a very different campaign, apparently, because what I saw was a lot of bullying, a lot of incredibly nasty talk, a lot of misogyny and racism, a lot of hatred directed at Muslims and immigrants, and people have a right to be scared. I'm not saying that the celebrity stuff makes sense, but I will tell you that there's a lot of people out there who are very scared about what this country's becoming.
Well, so they weren't scared about the fact of an alternative Hillary Clinton who could have been indicted on 50 different felonies, who had a corrupt history and a corrupt
Are we going to relitigate that now?
And that didn't disqualify her? You're telling me that didn't disqualify her? The FBI investigation, the pending DOJ, and if Loretta Lynch had been replaced, there would have been a legitimate prosecutor who would have prosecuted her. And I know Democrats. I know Democrat prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges who voted for Trump for that very reason. He wasn't their favorite, but the alternative was a disaster.
All right, so
the election is.
But wait, I want to get back to this. And by the way, Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro's who I was quoting on that article, by the way, as far as what this is driving this. But Matt Bennett, I want to get back to you because I want you to tell me what is the current state of the Democratic Party at this point. As these protests continue, what does this say?
Well, look, keep in mind that the violent protests, those people are thugs and criminals, and I agree with everything that's been said about them. They should be in jail. The protesters, generally speaking, though, the peaceful protesters are saying that they are bereft. They're feeling terrible that this man has been elected president. And the state of the Democratic Party is very, very grim right now. We have not been in this bad shape in terms of elected officials at every level, state, local, and federal, since Reconstruction in the 1800s. So we have a lot of work to do to put our party back together again. There's no question about that.
And this kind of behavior makes it worse.
All right, David, last word to you.
Yeah, this kind of behavior makes it worse. I mean, this isn't the way to deal with an outcome that you don't like. You organize, you get a candidate, and you move forward. But these children, if you will, engaging in not just rioting, but not just protesting, but rioting, criminal behavior, looting, assaulting people, trespass, and a million other felonies, are doing a very bad. Making a very bad statement to their cause, and they're just going to cause more difficulties going forward for that party, for the Democrat Party.
All right. Thanks to both of you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra. All right, well, coming up, we're going to speak with Asra Q. Nomani, who's getting a lot of attention after writing the column, I'm a Muslim, a woman, and an immigrant. I voted for Trump. Breaking tonight, new controversy swirling around who President-elect Trump will put on his national security team, with one name from the past in particular making waves. Chris Direwall and Mark McKinnon are here to break down who President-elect Trump will surround himself with in the Oval Office. But first, we go to Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge on the defense and security transition teams. Catherine.
After 50 of the nation's most senior Republican national security professionals said in August they could not support a Trump presidency, his team pulled together a group of lesser known but still highly qualified candidates. A widely circulated document reports that retired Army Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg is heading up the defense transition team. A former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Ron Burgess, is handling intelligence, and former House Republican Mike Rogers is overseeing national security. Rogers, who chaired the House Intelligence Committee for 4 years, abruptly announced he would not seek re-election in March 2014 after allegations of a conflict surfaced with his senior staffer and Clinton's closest aides. At the time, Rogers said he was leaving Congress to host a national radio talk show. The congressman, whose credentials include Army service as well as 4 years with the FBI, was also openly criticized for his committee's report on the 2012 Benghazi terrorist attack that killed Ambassador Chris Stevens, Foreign Service Officer Sean Smith, and former Navy SEALs Glenn Doherty and Ty Woods.
Are you saying that his report was not good and that people shouldn't take him seriously?
Yes. Well, they can take him seriously if they want to, but two of his Intel committee members were on our Benghazi committee. They didn't sign his report. They signed ours. You don't issue a final definitive report without interviewing eyewitnesses. He didn't interview the eyewitnesses.
A spokesman for Congressman Rogers said he stands by his committee's Benghazi report, that the witness interviews never changed the facts about Secretary of State Clinton's failures, and former staff had nothing to do with Rogers' decision to leave Congress. Two Trump campaign contacts cautioned against drawing conclusions about the transition, emphasizing that it will be the president-elect who makes the final call on all appointments. Sandra?
All right, Catherine, thank you. New developments on the leadership of Mr. Trump's transition team, with today's announcement that Vice President-elect Mike Pence will be taking over, effectively demoting New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. But reports on the makeup of the more permanent cabinet are turning heads tonight, especially when it comes to Chief of Staff. In the running, RNC Chairman Reince Priebus and Trump campaign CEO Steve Bannon. top the list. And earlier tonight, former Trump campaign chairman Corey Lewandowski left his job at CNN, adding more intrigue to the equation. Joining me now, host of I'll Tell You What and Fox News digital politics editor Chris Stirewalt, and co-host of The Circus on Showtime, Mark McKinnon. He also served as the chief media advisor to George W. Bush. All right, Chris Stirewalt, your crystal ball. Trump team has suggested this cabinet will be a mix of outsiders and more traditional choices. Do you expect any big surprises here?
Well, look, I think that some of it has shock value. Some of it will be worth firing up his base, letting them know that he's going to keep faith with them. And then some of it is designed to reassure Americans of all parties and folks in Washington that he's interested in an orderly fashion. I think that, by the way, news this evening that he has reached out to Mitt Romney and that he has looking for détente with one of his harshest critics and somebody he obviously did not like. These are further signs that Trump is trying to heal the Republican Party and trying to reassure people across the spectrum.
Well, there's certainly signs that he's shaking things up, Mark. When we got word today that Chris Christie was sort of demoted, I guess is the word we're using, and Mike Pence was put in charge of the team. What do you make of what you're seeing happen here?
Positive developments. I agree with Chris. I think that there's a lot of signs of President-elect Trump reaching across the aisle, reaching to some steady hands that have been around Washington. I don't necessarily read the Christie situation as I think we read too much into these things. I think it's rather a promotion for Mike Pence because Mike Pence is a guy who's been around Washington. He has relationships in Congress, knows all those people very well, much more so than Chris Christie. So I think that's a logical sort of evolution for Mike Pence to step into that job at this time. I think Christie did what he needed to do beforehand, and I'm sure that Chris Christie will land a plum spot in the administration somewhere.
So, Mark suggests that he's going to have to reach across the aisle. How do you see Donald Trump working with Democrats here?
I think he will do well with Democrats, in fact. I think one of the things that Trump's critics on the left are missing out on is this is a guy who comes out of New York. He comes out of the world of developers. He's been friends with Chuck Schumer, who is the presumed successor to Harry Reid as the Senate Minority Leader. He has worked with Democrats and been a Democrat in his life. I think that what you will see from Donald Trump much more likely is not the kind of austere conservatism that you might have seen with the Ted Cruz or something like that, but rather much more of a deal maker and much more of somebody who is comfortable working across the aisle.
I mean, Mark, you have gotten an inside look at what goes on behind the scenes with your show. I mean, what kind of people does Donald Trump like to keep around him? What could give us an idea who he's going to be picking there?
Well, I think that the Corey Lewandowski announcement today is very telling. I think he very much likes to have a core group of loyalists around him. I think he also understands that he needs to expand that, but I think he wants a circle of people like Corey Lewandowski around him that he trusts completely, and that he can, have as loyal soldiers around like a palace guard, really, of loyalists. I think that's kind of his tradition, and Corey certainly fits that billing. But I think there's also signs that he'll go well beyond. I mean, he needs to. He doesn't have a deep bench. I mean, that was a tight, small group on the campaign, so there's not many of them. But I think you'll see almost all those people right around the palace guard.
Is that true? I mean, because Chris, he's going to have to fill thousands of positions when he builds his team here. I mean, we just heard the report from Catherine Herridge about Mike Rogers, possibly Homeland Security Chairman. That could be a controversial pick based on that Benghazi report. Do you think there are going to be any big controversial picks by Donald Trump here?
Yes, but he doesn't know which ones will be controversial. That is the thing about filling out your cabinet and filling out your administration. It's not just thousands. There are tens of thousands of jobs that fall under the will and pleasure of the chief executive. Out there in that mix, it's not going to be the ones he thinks are going to be controversial. He thinks it's going to be controversial when he picks a Newt Gingrich for a top spot or somebody like that. The controversies arise as every president finds out. The people that you think are going to be boring picks turned out that they have scandals or problems or statements or things that they did, and all of a sudden that storm blows up out of nowhere, and you got to be ready to handle it.
All right, and Mark, this Sunday marks the series finale of Mark's show, The Circus. You've seen a lot of it on this show. The Kelly File has been lucky enough to be along for the ride from the start, as this show took us behind the scenes of one of the craziest presidential races in history. The series finale is no different, as the cameras were rolling at now President-elect Donald Trump's final appearance. Sort of some of those tender moments behind the scene of Donald Trump with his family members before he walked on stage.
Well, that's what we wanted to capture, was that authentic intimacy that you see behind the scenes, backstage, you know, at a very critical, highly emotional moment of the campaign, right as elections, the day was opening before them, and kind of all the team, the loyalists, the family together there backstage. And, you know, Donald Trump is largely a one-man band, so you don't see a lot of these people publicly a lot, like Steve Bannon. You know, we really get to see some shots of Steve Bannon there, but people like, you know, all that, Rudy Giuliani and the family, and Reince Priebus, who, by the way, I think should get MVP for this election for the number of plates that he kept spinning. But just to see that intimacy of the group interacting behind the scene at that critical emotional moment, that was a very, what we'd call a circusy moment. And the sort of thing that we really tried to capture in this campaign, to show people a different side of the campaign that they don't normally see.
At a very real moment, Chris Starwalt.
Yeah, and that's actually what I've loved about your show so much, Mark, is that it lets you see these moments that make us understand something. These are all just human beings, right? These are all just people. We turn them into villains, we turn them into gods, we turn them into all of these things. These are just people who fill out these slots in this republic, in this nation of laws, and not men.
Well said, Chris Steyerwalt. Thanks to both of you for your time on this Friday evening after, it's just, you know, one of those easy weeks. Thank you to both of you.
You bet.
All right, well, we wanted to bring you the story tonight of Asra Q. Nomani, a Muslim immigrant who cast her vote for Donald Trump this past Tuesday. But unfortunately, our Skype connection with her is not going to work out. So we do hope to have her back and let her voice be heard. Breaking tonight, we are tracking these major protests that are happening right now across the country in reaction to the election of Donald Trump. Protesters have been routinely staking out his building right here in New York City and his home, Trump Tower on New York's Fifth Avenue. And that's where we find Rob Schmidt live for us tonight. If you can hear me, what are you seeing there, Rob?
Sandra, I can certainly hear you tonight because the crowd has dropped significantly here on the third night of protests that we have seen. You can look behind me here. You can see it's about 50 people tonight. You're seeing the same thing. You're seeing a lot of different motives for being here. A lot of people for climate change. A lot of people want change in government. A lot of people tonight were just chanting about blaming the DNC for Donald Trump's election. So you get all sorts of things. But as I said, this is night 3. The first night, you remember, we had thousands of people out here. Last night, we had maybe a couple of hundred. Tonight, 50, and I'll tell you why. It's not that the motivation is any less. It's that here in New York, it's much easier to control a protest. It's much easier for the NYPD to manage a protest than it is in places like Los Angeles and Oakland, where people can kind of go wherever they want. In New York, if you want to be outside Trump Tower, there's only so many ways you can get here. And the NYPD has figured out how to cordon this area off. And the area around Trump Tower now is starting to look like the area around the White House. They have concrete barriers everywhere, and you can still drive down Fifth Avenue. If you see over here, you can still see cars coming by, and you can still move down Fifth Avenue, but walking through here has been a real hassle. It's been really tough just to get in and out of here on foot, whereas you can drive down Fifth Avenue, but security around here has been much tighter, and of course it is Christmas time, so it's created a major headache of traffic here in Midtown New York. Donald Trump, we're not sure if he is home tonight or not. He may have been home last night. We know his plane landed at LaGuardia. He's certainly aware that there are people protesting outside of his building. But tonight, people aren't even on 56th. Between 56th and 57th, they've actually pushed him down a block.
Rob, as the camera pans around there,
and the crowd has gotten smaller.
I know it's probably hard to hear me over the crowd. First of all, what are they chanting? And what's the age demographic of the people you're seeing out there?
Well, that's a great question. They're chanting right now. They're chanting "Love Trump's hate." They chant a variety of things. A lot of them I can't even say here on TV. A lot of them have curse words in them. The age range has been getting older and older. The first night, everybody was very young. Tonight, they're a little bit more mature and a little bit more on message. We'll send it back to you, Sandra.
All right, Rob Schmidt, thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. I'm Sandra Smith. This is The Kelly File.